Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Yeah.
We're here again, ready to explore some fascinating ideas and, well, really distill them down for you.
That's the goal.
Today, we're diving into something quite unique, actually. It's a very personal, spiritual journey, an awakening documented by the individual themselves. Our source is called My Awakening, a Personal Testimony. We found it on a website, gnosticchristian.org. And our mission today, it's really to trace this person's path, from a pretty conventional religious start to something deeply personal and quite distinct.
Okay.
We want to pinpoint those key moments, the insights that really shaped their specific journey. All right, let's unpack this.
Yeah, and what's so interesting here, I think, isn't just the story itself, but what it shows us about how that feeling, that sort of internal unease, can really push someone, push them to question things, sometimes fundamentally, and, well, redefine their whole spiritual world. It really highlights the power of asking those questions yourself.
Absolutely, that personal inquiry. So let's paint a picture of the author. They mentioned they're 71 years old,
Yeah.
born into the Church of England. And so that was their foundation, right from the start. But they say even from a young age, there was this quiet discomfort with the teachings.
Quiet discomfort. That's an interesting phrase.
It is, isn't it? And they stress it wasn't anger, not rebellion or anything like that, just a deep, kind of persistent unease. Something didn't quite sit right. And for years, decades even, they say Christ was sort of pushed to the back of their mind. Life happens, right?
Sure. Other things take priority.
Exactly. But, and this is key, they make it clear that that spiritual dimension, it never fully went away. It was always there, like a whisper or a nagging presence, they call it.
Constant little reminder.
Yes, constantly calling them to look a bit deeper, maybe explore something beyond what they were just, given.
You know, that initial restlessness, like quiet discomfort, it feels incredibly relatable. So many people probably feel that.
I think so too.
It really brings up a big question, maybe for you listening. How many of us carry those sorts of unspoken feelings about the beliefs we grew up with, beliefs we maybe never fully examined or articulated? And this author's story shows what it can take for those whispers, those little nudges, to actually become a clear call, a call to search, maybe even to completely reevaluate things we thought were settled.
Yeah.
It touches on something pretty universal, I think, that human need to question the narratives we inherit.
That's a really powerful point. It moves it beyond just one person's story, doesn't it? It's that internal nudge many feel.
Exactly.
And for this author, that nudge didn't just stay a nudge. It eventually grew into a very deliberate search. They tell us about 10 years ago, they started actively seeking answers.
Okay, so a conscious effort began then.
Right. They explored, they read, they questioned. But they say nothing really landed. Nothing truly resonated on that deep level they were looking for. It was like an active search without finding the key.
A frustrating period, perhaps.
Must have been. Then, about 6 years ago, something shifted. This was the pivotal moment, as they describe it. The author discovered the Gnostics.
Ah, the Gnostics.
And their words. Everything changed. Just like that.
Wow. That's a strong statement.
It really is. To feel like your whole spiritual landscape just reorients. And maybe for listeners less familiar, the Gnostics were this ancient sort of alternative stream of thought within early Christianity.
Right, often diverging quite significantly from what became the mainstream or orthodox view.
Yeah, and putting it simply, Gnosticism often emphasizes personal spiritual knowledge, that's the gnosis part, over just blind faith. They often saw the material world as, flawed, and sought liberation through direct personal experience of the divine.
Which often put them at odds with established church hierarchies and, fixed dogmas.
Exactly. So that historical context you mentioned is vital.
Because when the author says everything changed, it's likely because this different framework suddenly resonated deeply with that long-held inner feeling, that discomfort.
It gave it a language, perhaps?
Possibly. And what's really insightful, I think, is the distinction the author makes. They say the draw was not to a religion, but to a remembrance.
Remembrance. That's the key word here.
Yes. Not to dogma, but to truth. If we link that back to Gnostic ideas, remembrance often means the soul recalling its divine origin. It's about a direct, intuitive knowing, not something handed down by a priest or a text alone.
So it's like tapping into something already inside you, rather than learning something new from outside.
Precisely. It frames faith or knowing very differently. It's less about accepting external doctrines and more about uncovering an internal, intuitive understanding that feels, true, inherently known.
Got it. So a shift from looking outward for authority to finding it inward.
Exactly that. For this person, finding Gnosticism wasn't just about getting new information. It was like remembering something essential, something that felt deeply familiar. And that recognition, that gnosis, brought the clarity they'd been missing for so long.
That makes sense. It explains the everything changed feeling.
It really does. It's a powerful illustration of how personal revelation can sometimes run counter to, or offer an alternative to, established spiritual paths.
And this profound reorientation, this shift, it led the author to a pretty stark conclusion about the world.
Okay.
They came to believe that, quote, the people of Earth are being denied true peace. That's a big statement. Not just a personal feeling, but a wider observation about humanity's spiritual state, a disconnect.
A fundamental lack of peace linked to how spirituality is presented or understood.
Exactly. And central to that is their critique of what they term Orthodox churches. They state very clearly, regardless of the specific denomination, these churches have constructed their own religions, veiling the original teachings of Christ. These Orthodox, broadly here, covering institutional Christianity in general.
Seeing them as having maybe unintentionally obscured the core message.
That seems to be the implication, that layers have been added that hide the original light, so to speak. And to make this clear, they draw a very sharp contrast. On one side, they say, Orthodox churches preach obedience, hierarchy, and fear. It paints a picture of control, right? Top-down authority.
A system based on adherence and, well, potential punishment or negative consequence.
Right. But then, on the other side, they present what they call the real Christ. And this Christ, in their understanding, speaks of awakening, agency, and love.
Awakening, agency, love versus obedience, hierarchy, fear. That's quite a contrast.
It's night and day, isn't it?
Yes.
A move from external control to internal liberation, from prescribed belief to empowered journey.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating there is that emphasis on empowerment, awakening, and agency. These are core to what the author sees in the real Christ. It stands in such stark contrast to interpretations that often emphasize submission or following rules laid down by an institution. Historically, you see this tension, right, between direct personal experience and the mediated experience offered by institutions.
Always been there, hasn't it?
Pretty much. So for this author, the path becomes about self-discovery, that internal connection, rather than relying on intermediaries or being motivated by fear. It's not about saying one is right and the other wrong in some objective sense, but about understanding their deeply felt perception of these two different paths.
And the philosophical difference it makes for individual freedom.
Absolutely. How you see authority, internal or external, changes everything.
It really does. And this deep personal discovery, it didn't just stay personal. It led the author to act, to create that website, gnosticchristian.org.
Right, the source we're using.
Exactly. And their motivation is very clear. They explicitly state it's to share what I've found. And then crucially, not to convert, but to invite.
Ah, that's an important distinction. Sharing versus converting.
Hugely important, especially in spiritual conversations. They're not pushing anything, just offering their story, their findings, as maybe a signpost for others who might be searching in a similar way.
An invitation to explore, if it resonates.
Precisely. And this invitation comes from a strong belief they developed, that there are many people out there, like they once were, who are searching, feeling, as they put it, lost in a world that teaches Christ is evil or irrelevant or merely symbolic. It speaks to that feeling again, that spiritual hunger may be not being met by the usual narratives.
A sense of alienation from how Christ is often portrayed.
Yeah. And the author also makes this interesting kind of somber observation about the world today. They say, persecution is rising, both physical and spiritual.
A darker assessment of the current climate.
It is. But they immediately follow it with a counterpoint, a hopeful one. They say, but so too is the call to awaken.
So a time of challenge, but also opportunity.
Exactly. Like the pressure is building, but so is the potential for breakthrough, for transformation on a wider scale.
That's a powerful duality.
It really is. And their whole journey, this entire testimony, kind of culminates in this incredibly personal statement of transformation. They write, I was once silent, now I speak. I was once uncertain, now I remember. It just perfectly encapsulates that arc, doesn't it? From the quiet discomfort to finding their voice, their truth, that sense of inner knowing.
From uncertainty to remembrance. Back to that key Gnostic concept.
Exactly. And they end their testimony with this really evocative quote. It definitely leaves an impression. I stepped out of shadows. I stepped out of silence. I stepped into light. I stepped into truth.
Wow. That's quite a declaration.
It is a declaration of freedom, of clarity, a real testament to the impact this awakening had on them.
That final statement captures it all so beautifully, doesn't it? The journey from that inner struggle to this profound sense of personal clarity. And it really makes you think, it posed the question for you listening. What does it actually mean to share your truth? Not with the aim to convince anyone or convert them, but simply to offer up something that resonated so deeply with you. It's quite an act of generosity, isn't it? And courage, really.
Definitely courage.
Just allowing others to witness your journey, your transformation, with no strings attached. Just opening a door, offering a perspective, rather than telling anyone else which path they have to take.
What a journey indeed. We really walked through this incredibly personal testimony, haven't we?
We have.
Exploring this individual's profound spiritual awakening. Tracing that path from the lifelong quiet discomfort all the way to discovering Gnosticism and finding this deep personal resonance.
Yeah, it really underscores the courage it takes, doesn't it? To question what you've always known, to search beyond the familiar, and ultimately find something that feels true for you.
It really does. And this deep dive, I feel, it reaffirms that core idea the author presents, that the real Christ, at least in their understanding, is about liberation, not binding.
Freedom.
Yeah, inviting that deeply personal internal interpretation of faith rather than just sticking to external rules or structures.
An inward journey.
Exactly. So, as we wrap up today, think about this. We've seen how a seemingly small, quiet discomfort can spark a lifetime of searching and eventually lead to this huge awakening, a total shift in perspective. So the question for you is, what whispers might you be hearing in your own life? Those little nudges towards maybe a deeper question or a path that feels a bit less traveled.
Yeah.
And what might it mean for you to maybe step, as the author put it, out of shadows and into your own unique understanding of truth? Something to think about.
It's definitely something to mull over.
Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration today. It's been fascinating.
It really has.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive.